My fellow traveler through time and consequence, there comes a moment when quiet years accuse you, when effort has been spent, yet life has not moved. This is not chance. This is not cruelty. And if you turn away now, it may already be too late. There is a feeling you rarely admit to yourself. It arrives late at night when noise fades and excuses lose their strength. A subtle unease, not despair, something more dangerous. It is the suspicion that you are doing everything right, yet nothing is responding. You work, you plan, you endure. And still, the world does not seem to meet you halfway. Most people respond to this tension by tightening their grip on effort. They work harder, they wait longer, they become more patient. And in doing so, they betray themselves quietly, because the problem has never been effort. The problem is what effort is being sent from. There is a reason some lives move forward with an almost unfair ease, and a reason others remain heavy, resistant, delayed. That reason is not luck. It is not intelligence. It is not background. It is the psychological position from which a person acts. You have been taught, without words, that outcomes decide belief, that you must see progress before you are allowed certainty, that faith is earned only after results appear. This teaching sounds reasonable. It is also the root of stagnation, because when belief waits for evidence, action weakens, timing slips, decisions hesitate, and the mind begins to drift. Drifting is not laziness. It is far more deceptive. Drifting is movement without command, effort without conviction, labor without identity. A drifting mind says, "I'll try." A directed mind says, "This is done." Most people never notice the difference. They believe they are choosing when they are only reacting. There is a quiet self-betrayal hidden here. Every time you approach life as though it must prove itself to you, you announce without words that you are unsure of your own authority. Life listens to that announcement, not because it is cruel, but because it is responsive. The mind is not a mirror of reality. It is a command center. What you consistently assume to be true, without force, without panic, becomes instruction. This is where discomfort begins, because you have likely been trained to see confidence as arrogance, certainty as recklessness, expectation as entitlement. So you soften your stance, you lower your assumptions, you stay realistic, and realism quietly becomes resignation. There is a reason the most powerful men in history spoke decisively before proof arrived, not loudly, not emotionally, decisive. They understood something that is rarely taught because it threatens social comfort. The world rearranges itself around the strongest internal order it encounters. Henry Ford did not wait for permission from circumstance. Andrew Carnegie did not negotiate with doubt. Lincoln did not require reassurance from public approval, not because they were fearless, but because they understood fear was not an advisor. Fear is a follower. It follows whatever identity you feed it. Here is the invisible conflict, forming beneath your daily routine. One part of you wants certainty before commitment. Another part knows commitment must come first. This tension drains energy. It slows decision. It fractures momentum. And the mind cannot serve two masters. When you act as though outcomes are uncertain, your actions carry that uncertainty forward. People respond to it. Opportunities sense it. Time stretches under it. Not mystically, mechanically. The brain filters information based on assumed expectation. When expectation is weak, perception narrows. When perception narrows, opportunity becomes invisible. You do not miss chances because they are rare. You miss them because your mind was not positioned to recognize them. This is why two people can stand in the same room, and only one leaves changed. There is a reason this feels normal, and that reason is dangerous. You are trained to believe humility requires hesitation, that discipline means waiting, that hope must be moderated. But the most disciplined minds in history did not wait to feel certain. They chose certainty as an act of command, not optimism, not fantasy, alignment. They acted from the assumption that cause obeys decision. This assumption creates pressure. Pressure sharpens behavior. Behavior produces coherence, and coherence invites response. Most people never meet the real enemy because it never announces itself. It disguises itself as caution, as patience, as reason. But beneath it is a refusal to claim authorship. And life does not reward participation. It responds to authority. You feel this truth pressing now, whether you resist it or not, because if this is accurate, then many past delays were not imposed on you. They were accepted, and that realization carries weight, because once you see that outcomes have been waiting for internal alignment, you can no longer blame time, or chance, or circumstance. Something is being asked of you that cannot be undone. Not effort, not hope. Position, and once that position shifts, nothing remains the same. But the cost of refusing it is subtle and permanent. There is a moment when effort stops producing relief. You have felt it. You push harder, and the resistance pushes back. You improve skill, and the ceiling lowers. You become more disciplined, and yet nothing breaks open. At this stage, most people draw the wrong conclusion. They assume they need more force. But force has never been the missing element. The enemy is not a lack of work. It is the presence of an invisible governor placed on belief. You were not taught to see it because it hides behind virtues: caution, humility, patience, being realistic. These are praised publicly, but privately. They often serve fear. Fear is not panic. Fear is calculation obsessed with loss. It asks questions that sound intelligent. What if this fails? What if I am wrong? What will others think? And because these questions sound reasonable, they are rarely challenged. But fear does not ask questions to find truth. It asks questions to delay decision. Delay feels safe, and safety feels responsible. Yet safety has a cost most never calculate. Every delayed decision quietly trains the mind to distrust itself. This is how effort begins to fail. You may wake early, you may work long, you may sacrifice comfort. But if your decisions are made from a posture of permission-seeking, your actions broadcast hesitation. And hesitation is interpreted by people, by systems, by circumstance, as lack of authority. Life responds accordingly. Napoleon Hill understood this long before psychology named it. He observed that men who drifted were not weak. They were undecided. Drifting is the surrender of direction while remaining active. A drifting mind does not choose outcomes. It waits to see which outcomes are allowed. This is the enemy most people never identify. Not laziness, not lack of talent. Drift. Drift wears the mask of effort without command. You can recognize it by one question: am I acting to confirm belief or acting to discover belief? Most people act to discover belief. They say, once this works, I will be confident. Once results come, I will trust myself. Once others approve, I will commit fully. This logic seems harmless. It is lethal, because belief is not produced by results. Results are produced by belief, not blind belief. Directed belief, faith, as Hill described it, is not hope. It is decision repeated until doubt loses authority. Fear understands this, which is why it attacks decision first. Fear does not stop you from acting. It stops you from deciding. So you work, but you keep exits open. You commit, but with conditions. You move, but with one foot behind you. The mind cannot generate power from a divided stance. This is why effort collapses at higher levels. Early progress tolerates uncertainty. Advanced progress does not. At higher levels, life demands alignment, Henry Ford faced this when experts told him his engine was impossible. He did not argue emotionally. He did not seek reassurance. He simply refused to accept impossibility as an instruction, not because he was stubborn, but because he had already decided who was in command. Fear lost jurisdiction the moment decision became final. Most people never reach this moment because fear convinces them it is wisdom. Fear says, "Be careful," but it means, "Do not claim ownership." Fear says, "Wait," but it means, "Let time decide for you." Fear says, "Be realistic," but it means, "Lower your internal standard." And each time you listen, you reinforce an identity that waits for permission. This identity becomes automatic. Procrastination is not a time problem. It is an identity problem. You delay because the version of you making the decision does not believe it has authority. So effort increases, but effectiveness decreases. This is the hidden frustration of hard-working people. They feel betrayed by their discipline. But discipline without direction becomes self-punishment. The mind must know why it is acting from certainty. Otherwise, discipline eventually rebels. This is where many quit, not because they are weak, but because their effort was never supported by internal command. There is a quiet truth emerging here, and it is uncomfortable. The world does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you assume is inevitable. Assumption shapes posture. Posture shapes behavior. Behavior shapes response. This is not philosophy. It is cause and effect. You can see it in any room where leadership is present. The person others defer to is not always the loudest, not always the smartest. It is the one whose inner decisions feel settled. Settled minds move faster because they are not negotiating with themselves. Fear hates settled minds because once a decision becomes final, fear has nothing left to offer. So it works earlier, quieter, more politely. It encourages just-in-case thinking. And just in case, you never fully arrive. Here is the tension tightening now. If effort fails because belief is conditional, then changing outcomes requires something far more threatening than working harder. It requires removing fear's vote. And fear will not leave voluntarily, because once it is exposed, your old explanations dissolve, and you will no longer be able to say, "I didn't know." There is a point where the mind can no longer pretend it does not see, not a dramatic moment, not an emotional collapse, a quieter reckoning. It happens when you realize that nothing external is coming to rescue you from indecision. No permission, no perfect timing, no final confirmation, only a choice you have been postponing while staying busy. This is the break point. Up to this point, resistance could be blamed. Systems, people, circumstances. But once the pattern is visible, blame dissolves. You begin to notice something unsettling. Moments where action was possible, but commitment was withheld. Opportunities that felt off only because they demanded authority. Paths you abandoned, not because they failed, but because they required finality. Fear was present in all of them, but not as terror, as restraint. Fear did not shout. It whispered reason. This may not be the right time. Let's gather more information. Better to stay flexible. Flexibility sounds intelligent, but flexibility without direction is surrender. This is where most people retreat, because the next step is irreversible. You must accept that your life reflects your internal order, not your intentions, not your effort, your decisions. And decisions are not wishes, they are declarations of identity. When you decide, you are telling the mind who is in charge. This is why decision feels heavy. The mind knows it is binding. A drifting mind avoids binding itself. It prefers optionality. But optionality is the enemy of power. Andrew Carnegie understood this when he spoke of burning bridges. not literally but psychologically. Once retreat is removed, the mind reorganizes, energy sharpens, attention aligns, fear loses leverage. Most people never reach this state because they protect escape routes. They want success, but with reversibility. Life does not respond to reversible commitment. This is the truth that collapses resistance. Faith, as Hill described it, is not belief in outcomes. It is loyalty to decision. Loyalty even when evidence delays. This is why acting as though things work in your favor is not optimism. It is discipline. It is refusing to let circumstance vote on identity. At the breakpoint, something uncomfortable becomes clear. You have been asking life questions that only authority answers. Will this work? Is this safe? Am I ready? These are not strategic questions. They are evasion. The real question has always been, who decides? Once you see this, the old model collapses. Because if you are the one deciding, then hesitation is no longer caution. It is disobedience. This realization creates pressure, not anxiety. Pressure to align action with declared identity. This is why many turn back here, because they sense what comes next. If you act from the assumption that outcomes align with you, then excuses lose shelter. You can no longer wait for mood or confidence or reassurance. You must move as one who expects cooperation, not demand it. Expect it. Expectation alters behavior subtly. You speak differently. You choose faster. You tolerate less ambiguity. And ambiguity has been protecting your fear. Fear thrives in uncertainty because it remains relevant. Once certainty is chosen, fear has nothing to negotiate. This does not mean fear disappears. It means fear becomes background noise. The mind stops consulting it. This is the breakpoint few cross. Because once crossed, you cannot return to blaming the world without knowing you are lying. And that knowledge changes everything. The discipline required now is internal, not routines, not schedules. Mental loyalty. You must think in alignment with what you have decided. This is where autosuggestion becomes active, not repetition, but assumption. The mind accepts what it hears consistently, without argument. If you speak internally as though cooperation is normal, you begin to act as though resistance is temporary. And resistance senses this. People respond differently. Obstacles reconfigure. Not magically. Mechanically, you stop broadcasting uncertainty. This is where the old self dissolves, the one who worked hard but waited quietly. And the pressure intensifies because a new identity is forming, one that cannot coexist with drift. But the transformation is incomplete because authority must be maintained. And maintenance requires replacement. You cannot remove fear without installing something stronger. And that something has not yet been fully named. When fear loses authority, it does not leave a vacuum. The mind demands a governing principle. If you remove restraint without replacement, chaos follows. If you remove doubt without direction, arrogance appears. This is why many who reject fear collapse into recklessness. They mistake aggression for certainty, noise for power, urgency for purpose. But true authority is quiet. The replacement is not confidence. Confidence fluctuates. It is not motivation. Motivation fades. The replacement is faith disciplined by decision. Faith here does not mean belief that everything will feel easy. It means commitment to an internal order that does not negotiate with circumstance. This is where most misunderstand the idea of acting as though outcomes favor you. They imagine positive thinking. That is not what moves reality. What moves reality is consistency of assumption. The mind obeys whatever standard is applied repeatedly, without exception. If you assume resistance is meaningful, you slow. If you assume resistance is temporary, you persist. Persistence is not stubbornness. It is alignment maintained under delay. This is why Hill emphasized definiteness of purpose. A definite purpose does not ask if it is allowed. It proceeds as though allowance is inevitable. Rockefeller did not seek certainty from markets. He imposed certainty through structure. Structure calms the mind. A calm mind executes cleanly. This is the quiet power you are replacing fear with. Discipline becomes internal. You no longer discipline yourself to work harder. You discipline yourself to think in alignment. This is more demanding than effort, because thoughts appear automatically, and now you must decide which ones are allowed to stay. When doubt arises, you do not argue emotionally. You simply do not obey. When delay appears, you do not panic. You adjust execution, not belief. This is mastery. Autosuggestion, properly understood, is not affirmation. It is instruction. The mind listens to what is repeated calmly, so you speak internally as one who expects cooperation. Not because it is guaranteed, but because expectation sharpens behavior. Your tone shifts, your pace stabilizes, your decisions close faster. This is why others begin to respond differently. They feel coherence. The mastermind principle emerges naturally here, not as networking, as alignment. People align with certainty because it reduces friction. Uncertain minds create confusion. Certain minds create gravity. This is the replacement at work. Faith replaces fear not emotionally, but structurally. Your internal rules change. You no longer ask, "Will this work?" You ask, "What is required?" That single shift alters everything. Effort becomes effective. Time compresses. Momentum returns. But this creates a new responsibility, because once you live from this position, you must protect it. Exposure to doubt is now contamination. Not from others, from your own habits. Old thinking will attempt to return. It always does. It will wear familiar language, sound reasonable, feel responsible. You must recognize it instantly. Because once you have tasted authority, returning to drift feels unbearable. The transformation is almost complete. But there is one final danger. Power that announces itself invites resistance. The highest form of authority moves quietly, and this is where the final adjustment occurs. There is a moment when the need to prove disappears, not because achievement ends, but because certainty no longer seeks validation. This is the final shift. Power becomes silent. You stop explaining your direction. Stop defending your pace. Stop announcing your intent, not from secrecy, from settlement. The mind has accepted its role. At this stage, acting as though outcomes align with you is no longer a strategy. It is posture. And posture changes everything. You move without rush. You speak without urgency. You decide without spectacle. This is what separates those who rise quietly from those who burn loudly. Abraham Lincoln carried this posture through years of delay and public doubt. Not emotional calm, structural calm. He was not waiting to see if history would approve. He had already decided his position. This is why quiet power unsettles others. It does not ask to be understood. It does not ask to be followed. It simply proceeds. You will notice a strange reversal here. The world that once felt resistant now feels responsive, not because it has changed, but because you have stopped negotiating. You no longer interpret friction as rejection. You treat it as instruction. Adjust, proceed, remain aligned. This is where effort becomes almost invisible. Work happens, but it no longer feels heavy, because the mind is not fighting itself. This is the permanent alteration. You are no longer someone trying to make things work. You are someone who assumes alignment and corrects execution. Failure loses its emotional charge. Criticism loses its authority. Delay loses its threat. These fears once governed you. Now they report to you. And this is why few speak of this stage openly, because it cannot be given. It must be claimed, and once claimed, it cannot be unclaimed without conscious betrayal. You will sense this change in small moments. When others hesitate, you will not rush them. When plans shift, you will not collapse. When uncertainty appears, you will not flinch. Not because you are fearless, but because fear is no longer in command. The quietest truth now reveals itself. Life has always been responsive. You were simply speaking from a divided position. Now your voice is singular, and singular forces move reality. This is not inspiration. This is alignment, and alignment once established becomes inevitable. You will not announce this to anyone. You will simply live differently, and those who recognize it will know. The rest will never understand why things seem to work out around you. They will call it luck. You will know better.